Hi, everyone. Welcome to Steps Podcast. This is the All Things ADU podcast. Thank you for listening once again. This is episode 76 or 77. It's hard to keep track now. Anything above 50, I'm just kind of keeping track as I go. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Danny with ADU Resource Center. And, the name really says it all, but I'm going to you guys a bit more details about who they are, where they came from, what's their background, and then we'll dive into some really good topics that I think will be useful for, anyone listening, whether you're an investor, homeowner, or an ADU advocate. My goal every single week is to bring highly vetted people to you guys to share what's working right now, what are some of the strategies that are helping our current housing market. So the ADU Resource Center was originally a custom and track home builder in 2010, servicing both California and Florida, which I'd like to learn a little bit more of, in 2020. And then when the ADU legislation changed to allow homeowners to legalize and repurpose their unused sections of their property into ADUs for family or for rental purposes, they saw the opportunity and then changed their business model and also the DBA, and then never looked back. Now approaching 2025 with over 500 plus ADU designs and projects built in Southern California, the ADU Resource Center is not only the leader in the field, but on our way to being the largest ADU specific design and builder in California. And just to highlight a couple other things here, they are based out of Glendale. They service all of SoCal, specifically LA County, Orange County, and I believe even San Diego, but really hyper focused in our markets here that we service as well. And I'll hand it off to you, Danny. I think you can do a lot more in sharing.
You said it all. I have nothing else to say. Thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah. Yes. And that's it, guys. In the end.
No, follow Danny more. That was good. No, I think that one of the things that I think we're seeing, since you're in the real estate as well, I don't know if you've noticed, Stephanie, but first off, thank you for inviting me on your show, first and foremost. But something that I think is kind of a feel-good thing as a byproduct of the ADU space. Did you know, and maybe you do, that this is the first time in 85 years that 3 generations of families are now deciding to live together on a single property because of the ADUs. So we have moms and dads now living somewhere on the back of the property where we can keep an eye on them. At some point, there's a changing of the guard, and the responsibility of our parents taking care of us shifts. Now we have to take care of them. So assisted living is quite expensive, as you know.
Right.
And a lot of people aren't sure that it's worth the money because the money goes out the window. It never comes back. So it's lost. And we're not even sure if the care is all that good. So having mom or dad or both living out back where we can keep an eye on them, how great is that? We can have breakfast with the grandkids every day. And when we've had enough of each other, go home, and they can go and watch their shows in their backyard, and we'll try it again the next day. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing. I think we're really, really proud of being able to do that and unify families. So many times families live, a good distance. I grew up in LA County, and my folks moved to South Orange County, and it didn't seem like that's a big deal. But an hour's drive deterred me from going to visit them as often as I could have or should have, because I was busy. I had my own life and family and career. But now with the ADUs space, offering ADUs out back, I think that's one of the neatest byproducts of all, is just the ability to see mom and dad or your kids for no reason at all, just because they're family and they're out back.
Yeah, that's a big one. I've actually talked about that on some of the podcast episodes in the past, where, I talk about how a lot of people obviously are doing them for rental purposes, but I think the huge impact that it's making in, our communities, especially these high dense areas, and affordability too, coming with that conversation, is the fact that you can do exactly what you just said. You can have this co-living space with your immediate family or your family members, and that could be either way, right? I see sometimes baby boomers wanting to build the ADU for themselves. They live in it, and now they have their kids live in the bigger home or they rent out the main
Right.
home because it makes a lot more sense. So it allows families to really dictate how they want their wealth to be distributed and managed and kind of leverage too
Right.
for them, right? Because yeah, I mean, assisted living it's definitely expensive, and they're definitely not getting the treatment that or the energy, right? Like think of how it would be if you're like 85 and you're living in an assisted living home versus having your own, custom made cute space in the backyard. And like you said, you have this co-living situation, but you also have this sense of privacy, and people can actually your kids can take care of you because you're only next door.
Yeah. And the ADU thing's not really that old. If you think back, the legislation started as a result of COVID. So
Right.
Governor Newsom said, look, if everybody's quarantined and relegated to it, and remember, there was a lot of layoffs also because
Mhm.
people were cutting back their expenses because the economy went through a rough time during COVID in the beginning of 2020. So people are going to go, look, man, I got laid off. What can I do to supplement my income? I don't have an income. And so I thought it was brilliant that he said, okay, tell you what, let's make a way for you guys to use unused property out back and turn it into a supplemental income for yourselves. And we're going to make some changes. So there's going to be a table of contents. So that you have to have, 5 ingredients. So it's got to have a kitchen, a bedroom, a bathroom, a living room, and a dedicated address, right? And you can't call it a granny flat anymore. You can't
Right.
call it a casita. It's going to be called an accessory dwelling unit or ADU, right? So that's the only rule. And so people go, great. And so I think we can almost break down a bulk of our clients into 3 categories that we see, popular ones. The assisted living one we already covered, right? So that
Right.
we don't have to figure that one out. At some point, I had a family tell me that their mother fell. Father was no longer with us. Mother fell, and she was on the floor for 4 days before anybody knew that she was in trouble. A neighbor happened to go knock on the door, and she heard her. And we go, oh my God. So this is a real thing. And elderly people sometimes have bouts of dementia. We don't want them cooking on an open flame because they can burn the house down without even realizing it. So there are reasons why we want to have, keep an eye on our moms and dads when they start getting up there in age. And the ADU is a perfect solution. Almost always the ADU starts off for a family member, either a son or a daughter, or a mom and a dad, and then later can be repurposed into a rental application. But so we know about the assisted living type of application, but did you know, well, I'm sure you do because you're in real estate, the average home in Southern California is $800,000.
Right.
And the average down payment requirement for financing is 20%. So let's say you've got a grown-up adult son or daughter, and with their spouse or significant other, they go to an open house, one of the open houses that you might do yourself, Stephanie.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
we saw a house we like. It's in Huntington Beach. It's 800,000. Can we have $160,000 down payment for the house? And mom and dad go, well, hang on now. What's the monthly payment going to be? So the monthly payment at 6.5% is roughly $5,900. That doesn't include impound taxes. It doesn't include homeowners insurance. So if we add that back in, that's
Right.
almost $7,000 a month. So most of the young people out there, their income won't qualify. Their debt to income ratio, they won't qualify. So mom and dad now have a different alternative other than saying no. So look, I won't give you $160,000 and leave you with a $7,000 a month mortgage payment that you probably wouldn't even qualify for. But what I will do is I'll give you a couple $100,000 worth of dirt out back, and you can build your ADU out there and build as big a one as you want and be happy. And when it's our time to leave this world, you can inherit our property, move into the front house, and then rent the ADU out back. So it's they're creating generational wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot easier to justify. It's a lot easier to go that route for young families starting out. And they can even be on the loan with mom and dad to establish credit. So it's not a bad day, and it doesn't have to break the bank for them or mom and dad. So that's category number two. A lot of young families are building ADUs. The third one is an obvious one as well. You know, retirement is going to creep up on everybody. And unless you have a pension, Social Security is just simply not enough to live on. It's going to be poverty. So what people are going is they're nervous approaching their golden years and go, what am I going to do? I can't live on this pittance of Social Security that's going to be given me. Well, what if we took an unused portion of your backyard? Could be your garage. You know, a lot of the stuff in our garage, maybe 25% of what's in my garage is important. The rest of it, I'm too lazy and I hoard it.
Right.
So I can certainly take 25% of my garage and put it in a 10 by 10 storage unit somewhere out back. Now that means I dump or go to the Goodwill and clear out my garage, which could now be used to create a mini apartment situation. And this happens daily. We do this a lot. Well, guess what? If we just took the garage, which is a typical 2-car garage, is 20 feet by 20 feet, and converted it into a brand new ADU or apartment, those, I don't care what city you live in, Stephanie, those are going to rent for $2,000 a month. So,
Right.
I mean, you're instantly going to create mailbox money to supplement retirement. It's not a bad day. It's a really good thing. So those are the three primary conditions that we're building ADUs for our customers.
Yeah, I mean, all those honestly is typically what I see, right? Helping elderly, and then also helping us millennials tap into the market. There's really no other way for your average, millennial to be able to afford a $5,500 monthly payment on an $800,000 home. So yeah, a lot of baby boomers are helping their kids leverage the equity that they have on their property to build an ADU. That's one common theme I see definitely in SoCal. And on the higher end, there's also recreational purposes for people building ADUs. And in multifamily, there's affordable housing routes. There's, different motives. There's repurposing of space. I just like the flexibility that ADUs allow from, someone who's 85 and wants to build an ADU for themselves to, a developer who's really wanting to implement it at scale with, legislations like SB 1211. AB 1033 is also going to help people keep that generational wealth. Now these kids will be able to possibly sell off one of these ADUs if these cities opt in, which is only a matter of time, right? Because San Jose has said yes, and I'm trying to be very proactive and making sure that the other cities catch on to that, because obviously they want to work with anyone. Hopefully it's me who they choose to work with. And I'd be more than happy to help these cities advocate for AB 1033 as well.
You mentioned multifamily. There's a fourth dimensional thing, and we have a very, very big investor clientele, and we have sort of a different, I would say, a very different conversation with them, because to them it's all about ROI, right? So how can I optimize my properties and get the most out of them? And let's be honest, the purpose of having investment properties is a return. So there's new legislation. So AD Resource Center, we're a part of the Casita Coalition. So we're very, very up on legislation, constantly looking for new things that are going to make customers' lives easier. And the multifamily legislation that just came out, it used to be that you could only do 25% of your units. So if you had, 4 units structure, you can only build one ADU. Well, now they've changed the ratio 1 for 1. So if you've got 4 units and you've got carports, or you've got garages on the property, or you've got space that you can do detached, you can do 1 for 1 ratio. That means you can now take an existing property and optimize it. So let's say the cap rate on your investment is low. Well, hang on now. If we add a couple more ADUs to that same property, that performance cap rate could double or triple. Now that could change the whole complexion of what that property is doing if it's underperforming. So again, that's a whole different type of conversation, but it's exciting. It's very exciting for investors right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to some investors where, when we had the 25% density rule, it actually did not make sense to build 2 or 3 on their multifamily. But now with, they actually allow you to have up to 8 units if you have an 8 unit structure. Now it's making sense, right? If you have a 16 unit building, 20 unit building, and you can add eight, and I believe it's eight plus the 25% density rule, right? So, I mean,
Correct.
it's really like 10xing the ADU strategy at scale. So, I
And
mean, on a
it's
higher level, yeah.
even, and the legislation for ADUs is simple. It falls under the affordable housing division. So in California, the I don't know what's at the top of the list, solving homelessness problems or affordable housing solutions. They're either one or two or whatever.
Mhm.
But we've, since 2020, every single year we get new legislation that makes it easier and easier, and they're lifting
Easy.
ordinances. And now, with, I think we've seen in Southern California the fires recently. So
Right.
they're even lifting the ordinances and the normal red tape that
I was just
we
gonna say
would
that, yeah,
bog
for
us down. They're committed, and so are the surrounding counties and cities. They're saying we're going to copycat, so we're going to try to fast track things. So it's an unfortunate time because of the crisis, but it's going to create opportunities for people that have been thinking about it or already in the process of doing it that could make their life easier.
Yeah, and one thing I talked about, I told you I had an architect last week who lost his house in the fires. Used to live in Pacific Palisades, and we're just talking about different strategies on how to rebuild, because I was really inspired by his resilience and his mindset. Right, he did the
Mm.
podcast outside, like he didn't even have his house or an office space to record the
Wow.
podcast out of.
Wow.
Yet he showed up and he was giving a lot of, from an architectural standpoint, he was just giving so many hacks and knowledge and nuggets on how we should rebuild, right? And so, to your point, I think the fact that cities are trying to streamline the process, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still going to be difficult to build, right? Because there's still a lot of moving pieces that come with that. But we talk so much about how ADUs really solve that short-term solution and long term, right? Right now, people who are experiencing these displacements from the LA fires, we're already in a short inventory. So I always
Right.
see the real estate market as an agent, right? I'm actively in the marketplace. So I can say, we're already in a shortage of inventory. You have very limited qualified buyers because there's a huge demand. There's a lot of buyer demand, but there isn't enough buyers who
Right.
actually qualify. So you're not getting multiple offer situations, but you have very limited buyers and very limited inventory. And now with all these people displaced from the fires, where are they going to shift to? Orange County. And that's mainly where I do my business, right? So I just see this ripple effect of, more demand. So these prices may increase. Rentals, we're already seeing that they're increasing as well.
All right.
So ADUs
So
kind of help solve that issue, I believe.
So I guess we're shifting gears and we're talking about the direct and indirect effects of this crisis. So as long as we're on
Right.
the topic, let's kind of, peel back the layers and see how it's going to affect us. So for the victims themselves, let's talk about the direct effect first, then we'll talk about the indirect. So the direct effect, obviously, is they have to rebuild. Now, the challenge is going to be the insurance companies don't have the resources to settle entirely with everybody because I think
Mhm.
the last number was 19,000 homes and businesses burnt down to the tune of $200 billion with a B. So the
Right.
assets are not there. So the direct effect is they are going to get partial settlements and delayed settlements. So what do you do in the meantime? So I think I told you I host a monthly educational webinar
Mhm.
for our clientele. Our next one will be on February 12th. And I have a crisis team that we're going to be answering these tough questions for the community. And then more importantly, the indirect effects, so that we're sort of anticipating that there are three things that the victims themselves will probably likely have to do, whether they like it or not. They're going to have to get a trailer. Once the EPA lets them back on the property and all the toxic caution is removed,
Right.
they're going to want to safeguard their property. And to do so, they'll need an RV of some kind to stay on the property occasionally. They'll probably need a long-term place to stay because kids got to go back to school. They may even have to go to a new school. We don't know,
Right.
right?
Right.
And depending upon how long that takes, I don't think families can live in a trailer for very long without wanting to get a divorce. So they're going to have to
Yeah.
figure out a midterm solution. So a midterm solution is surprisingly, I can get an ADU through city planning faster than a main house. So they may have to either do a prefab ADU, which we also handle, drop on the property, or build something. Now, there's a challenge because in some of the old neighborhoods where they have power lines, the crane cannot drop in an ADU. So we have to do a custom build. They may have to do a midterm solution because I believe that the claims are going to take 5 years before the dust is settled. So if
Wow.
your property is going to be held in limbo for 5 years, you need a little bit something more than a trailer to live in.
Hmm.
An ADU makes sense because we can get it done quick, we can get it done fast, and then you can live in the ADU while you're redesigning your main house, which is it's going to take some time. That's the direct effect. The indirect effect is everyone else, all of us. So, with 19,000 homes and businesses needing to be rebuilt, do you think there's a chance that the planning division is going to be bottlenecked?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's going to
And
take us back to COVID times, right? When,
right. So they are sworn that it's victims first and they are going to try to fast track them. Well, if you got 19,000 people that are going through planning and it's victims first, what about the rest of us that were not necessarily directed by the fire,
right,
but
right.
I still have my own project on the horizon. Am I going to be pushed off to the back? Probably. Probably. So what does that mean? Well, supply and demand controls pricing. And if we remember, we saw during COVID when the housing market went crazy, we are tied, construction is tied to the housing market. So remember when you were listing homes, not very long ago, a couple of years ago, people were getting over asking price,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
Those
there were
were
bid
the
wars.
those were the fun times, right? If you got in real estate during that time, I mean, you didn't even have to do much to sell a property, to be quite honest.
There were bidding wars. My sister was trying to buy a house. She lost on 5 bids, and she goes, "I don't believe this. How do I keep losing?" So the realtor said, "You got to be willing to pay over." And she goes, "How much over?" He goes, 50, 70. She goes,
I
"Are
was
you
gonna
kidding me?"
say at least 70 to 100,000 in
So
many cases.
she paid over 70 asking
Hmm.
price finally
Hmm.
to get her house, right? But she had to come up with $70,000 extra down because the financing didn't cover that because that wasn't the appraised value. That was the selling value based on bid. So it's very, very complicated. So a lot of our customers said, forget it. I'm not doing it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep my house. I'm going to add an ADU. I'm going to
Right.
expand it, do a room addition or whatever. So what happened was, as your business went crazy, our business went crazy. And then the supply chain got out of whack. And so 2x4s went from $3 to $12 because building materials we ran out. We can see that right now with eggs, right? So when eggs used to
Right.
be $4, now why are we paying $12 for eggs? Well, the chicken flu. So 25 million egg laying hens had to be put to sleep. So now there's a shortage of both chicken and eggs. So therefore the supply went up. Well, I think we're going to see this again with the bottleneck because the demand for building materials with 19,000 displaced homes is going to be a no-brainer. So we're just going to see, and maybe it's the suppliers being opportunists. I don't know. I don't know. But it could be a combination of both that we're short and they're trying to make a few bucks.
Of course,
But
it's always both because then you have other competitors, right, that come in, and
right.
so you've got
So
people that are fighting for best price, but keep.
so we're not only trying to educate the victims of the fire and give them a fast track to get their lives back in order, but we're also sort of having private consultations with our clients that we've been working on that haven't pulled the trigger. And we're thinking that if you're not in queue already, we're seeing that maybe 40% of the ADU projects won't get built if they're not done by 2026 because the line is going to get too long and the building materials costs will get too high. And out of principle, they're going to go, forget it. I'm not going to pay that. It's too much. I'll wait for prices to go down, and they never will. So the project will never get built.
Yeah, and I wonder out of those 19,000 people who have been displaced, where they currently stand. You've got some people who have equity, who can leverage that equity to rebuild. Some people may not. some people may use some of these payouts from the insurance companies barely enough to get them by for a midterm rental, right? Or, some sort of temporary stay. And I honestly think that it's going to take a while for us to see this, because the people who do have a mortgage on their property right now, I know that they can call their bank, and they're offering forbearances for the next 12 months. And so that may put a band-aid on it for now, but a year from now, then we'll see where that goes. There's just
I,
so many different ripple effects.
yeah,
100.
we're in uncharted territory, and
Yeah.
so for the victims, it's scary, of course, but the indirect effect for people that has been kind of toying with the idea, yeah, thinking about an ADU. Well, look, I'm not saying take your time, but hurry. I'm just saying that if you don't get ahead of the stampede, you'll get pushed to the side. And by the time the dust settles and it's finally your turn, the pricing will be too high. You won't say
I
yes
mean,
to it.
yeah, remember back in 2017, 2018, you could build an ADU for 50 to 80,000. Remember those days, right?
Oh, those are good old days. Yeah.
Under 100,000. Now your standard ADU garage conversion is 120 to 150. And next year it may be 250, right?
Well, the
Because
reality is that if we look at history, if we don't learn from history, we're certainly going to repeat it. And construction pricing never goes down.
right.
Um, it stays the same for a while until it's time to go up again. And then that becomes the new norm. And that's just the way things are. Things just don't normalize. I don't know if groceries will ever come down. We may just get used to those prices, and that's just the way things are.
Mhm.
Gas in California is higher than every other state. I don't know if it's ever going to go down. But if construction and building materials follow the same suit, this is as good as it gets. It's never going to be cheaper than now. And I'm not saying that as a sales pitch. I'm saying that as a cautionary tale, that I don't want to be right and say I told you so, but I told you so. So if
Yeah,
you
and I mean,
miss
it's
the trick,
only logic, right? Like inflation is at an all-time high. And yes, it fluctuates a little bit, but inflation really dictates, like, for example, subcontractors, right? If they need to buy these $12 eggs, like, do you think that they're going to keep their price per square foot, at the same price in
your
today's world?
margin, as the
Everyone
wholesale,
has to accommodate to the inflation. And that goes for even us as agents, right? Like, I think our commissions have been the same for the last over 10 years. They're always negotiable, but the standard is always about the same. And I think in some cases they should increase it, because we also need to keep up with inflation and our fees, right? We pay so much
right,
in fees to be able to
right,
operate and be in business every year. So everyone feels it 100%.
yeah, yeah. You know, I uh, I didn't mean to go dark on the podcast and talk about stuff that sounds scary, but
No,
at the
this is
same
good
time, I don't want
information.
to shine the light on doom and gloom and stuff like that, because there's
Mhm.
obviously some bright times ahead. It's just if there's any message that I want to put clear, if you haven't started your ADU, you're not in queue, and the settlement claims have not started yet. They've got partial claims, mostly for temporary housing, but not for
Right.
the complete rebuild. They're going to be staggered. And as they start receiving more and more funds, we're going to find that they don't have the funds to build the main house
Mhm.
yet, but
Mhm.
they can rebuild an ADU, and they have to keep an eye on their property. So I don't know if you know this, but I asked a mutual friend of ours, Meredith, if we had a Pacific Palisades home that was worth $4 million, and now it's leveled, what's the valuation on it now, and how are they going to get a loan to
Right.
rebuild? She goes, well, strangely enough, if the foundation is in place and all they do is duplicate the old house, they can improve it on finishes and so forth. But as long as they use the existing foundation, it's not a ground up construction, it's a renovation. So the house still maintains the comp value in the neighborhood. And it'll probably be worth more because it'll be brand new when it's rebuilt. So that's a good feather in their cap. But I see that the insurance companies are going to try to negotiate partial settlements because that's their job, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I thought I saw a post on LinkedIn that said they weren't going to allow for people to build the ADU without the main home being built first, or at least the middles both at the same time, right? For the main home and the ADU.
Everything everything that we know is now changed because it's an emergency. It's a 911 thing. So the rule book is
Got it.
now put on the shelf, and anything that makes sense is open for
It's
discussion.
open. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think people should take action, and it's not about going dark. I think that you're bringing up very good points, and we started off giving you guys all the benefits and the different ways that people are utilizing ADUs and how it's helping. But I also think that especially for the victims, they're probably emotionally tired right now too. So they kind of really have to think things through and not act emotionally and just logically. I think
Mhm.
right now, if you really should consider having a conversation with someone like you, someone like myself, to kind of guide you through that process. But take action now because prices of everything is going to go up in the next 12 months. So you're
Yeah.
better off, doing
Yeah.
it now.
And I invite your listeners to tune into our webinar. You can go to
Yeah,
our
I'm
web.
gonna actually be part of that. So how can
We
people reach out to you guys? And then, yeah, where can they get info?
we actually had it set up. It was going to be aired yesterday on
Oh,
Wednesday, the first, or not the first, but whatever date yesterday was. But we have a crisis panel that's going to join us, and we had a conflict. So they said, "Is there any way that we can reschedule?" So we rescheduled. So we pushed it off officially today for 2 weeks. But if you go to our website, aduresourcecenter.com,
okay.
you give us a day or so, we'll have the registration info. It's free; it doesn't cost anything. You just got to register so that we can add you to the list. And we're going to be dealing, Meredith will be on the panel. She's going to be talking about financing questions, and we'll dedicate half of the webinar to just the talking points and the frequently asked questions that everybody wants to know. We'll answer them to the best of our ability. And then we'll open it up for questions on the guests so that they can say, hey, what about my situation? What about what's going on here? It's obviously for anybody that's directly affected of the fire that has questions, because trying to get information right now is tough, and you're getting a lot of people are getting the runaround. We'll do our best. Um, the other thing is that the indirect questions that, what if I'm not affected by the fire, but I'm hearing that I need to probably move sooner than later, and we're going to give you the why part and how part and stuff like that. My email is danny@aduresourcecenter.com, and you can email me directly with any of your questions. My direct line is 818-855-5844. If you want to chat, you can. If I don't call you, if I don't answer, I'm with a client, but I'll call you right back. And, we're just going to put it out there to see what we can do as a community to try to help. And if we can, we're happy to do so.
I love that. Yeah, I'm so glad that I had you on the podcast. I was talking to Danny offline, and I was telling him we've kind of been running around the same circles, the same group of people, but we never crossed paths. I'm also a member of the Casita Coalition, so I don't even know if I've seen you on the calls. Probably so, but we finally got him on, and I think we rescheduled once or twice before that. So I appreciate you taking the time today to join and just share your knowledge. And I'm sure at some point we will collaborate and work together. So,
Looking
yeah,
forward to it.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks.